Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for attending. My name is Yona Verwer. I'm the founding director of the Jewish Art Salon. And I want to thank Judith, Joseph, and Dorit, Dotan for organizing this excellent series with the help of Chana, Wiesenthal-Elias, and Cheselyn, Amato. Really looking forward to this session. Back to the curators.
Thank you, Yona. Going where it's air conditioned, I hope. Welcome, everybody. As usual, we're going to ask you to put questions into the chat as they occur to you for the artists. And we have a fabulous program this morning. I just want to welcome you. This is actually the third edition of the Jewish Art Salon Open Studios online programs. And the next program will be on Tuesday, July 25th. Sorry, I misspoke. Sunday, July 25th at noon Eastern time. And watch the Jewish Art Salon for an email with details. Today, we're going to present three artists, Yehudis Barmatz-Harris, Beth Adler, and Joani Share. And we're going to begin with Yehudis Barmatz-Harris. Yehudis has a BFA from Pratt, an MA from Leslie College, and she works in new media, assemblage, and installation. Yehudis is inspired by mysticism, while her methods are born out of American ecofeminist process art movements. Her work focuses on the nexus of individual and community and embraces identity. Site-specific projects include her public work with local children, a memorial, and a pop-up exhibition in an abandoned school building. Yehudis' first solo exhibition was in Beita Gallery, Jerusalem, with a grant from Pais in 2020. She has exhibited in Israel, the United States, and Europe. And Yehudis, I'm going to cue up your video, but please, while I do that, go ahead and, introduce us to it.
Yeah, sure. So good evening or good afternoon or good morning, depending where you are. I made this video. This is the first of a series of videos that I started around identity in motherhood and in connection to mothers. This was particularly for an installation for Art of Motherhood, an exhibit that I initiated in 2015 for the Jerusalem Biennale of Contemporary Jewish Art. It was curated by New Circus Banks. The videography was by Leah Luckstein, and the idea was to express the cycle of motherhood, the cycle as in the body, the cycle of life that's experienced in motherhood, and to try to portray the experience of how it engages the body and the emotions. That's it. Go ahead and watch it.
Okay, I'm going to start the video now. Thank you, Yehudis. Okay, thank you, Yehudis.
I would love to hear some reactions before I jump in.
Sounds great.
Is it possible?
Absolutely. I have a question. Actually, I want to just say that I watched this video initially with no background at all. So I did not make the motherhood connection, and I just thought it was very mysterious and very intriguing. And I'm actually glad to know, to have heard your explanation, because it really did change my perception of it. How did digging, that hard digging in that hard soil, what did that express for you personally about motherhood? I mean, I have my own thoughts about it, but I'm interested to hear, what that meant to you.
Well, I see Earth is symbolic of motherhood. The concept of Mother Earth is well known to everybody, and in order for Earth to be fertile, it has to be worked through. And I see. I work with a lot of symbols, and so this is symbolic of the process of motherhood. But I think also motherhood in general is very symbolic of the processes that a soul has to go through, or that that are. If I wouldn't say soul, maybe also psychologically, what a person has to go through emotionally in order to work through things, and but as a mother, I think that it's something that's felt very profoundly, just in order to be able to be ready for a child, there's a lot of work that has to be done. Sometimes it's even something that comes across physically, until someone is able to feel fertile, is able to hold, is able to have a womb that holds a child. And then and also for women who it is something that comes easy. Then anyways, the process of becoming a mother is still a lot of digging, a lot of softening, a lot of bringing up emotions and unprocessed feelings and working through them. It's an integral process.
That's very touching. So, and I love your connection of motherhood and digging. This is thoughts, deep thoughts about it. So Mary is saying here, Mary Williams, she says that it made her cry. How can you react to that?
How can I react to that?
Well, you don't have to.
Maybe Mary would like to comment.
When I see it, also makes me cry. So yes, if Mary would like to comment, I'd love to hear more.
The entire video was made so painstakingly. It was very quiet and beautiful. All the building, the digging in the building, and then the violence of the breaking up was hard for me to watch.
Yeah. Well, that's something that comes up in my work, particularly also in my videos, where I'm working through building and then the experience of destruction, and then having to go back and build that again. That is something that I work through in my art in general, and also comes up in my videos, and definitely also in relation to motherhood.
Yeah, I was struck
I think that's also part of the process.
I was struck both by the creativity and the destructive forces that were at work, which sort of, yeah, it symbolizes motherhood and it symbolizes life. I mean, we look for joy and we sometimes experience sadness, but I guess it's the complexity of all of it together. And I thought you really tried to it's hard to put it into words. I mean, we're talking into words, but probably the better way to express that is symbolically. This process of creativity and destruction and all of the complexity of life that signifies.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's nice to see you, Ethan.
I thought that,
Yeah, absolutely.
I thought your choices were excellent as far as the metaphor of the creation, the seed, the water, all that really related to Mother Earth and you as a mother. I thought it was an excellent metaphor. Thank you.
Yeah, we have Elizabeth asking something. Jump in,
Yeah.
Elizabeth.
Yes, I came in a little late, unfortunately, but what I saw and I understood the theme. And, you know, I think as mothers, when we have young children, we build up these walls of protection. And then I think as mothers, the only way we can let our children grow into adulthood and be free is really destroying those protective walls. And we rebuild new relationships with the children as they become adults. They can't be the same extreme protection. So I think, you know, it's the tug of us, the tugging as mothers to, you know, protect and to let go, protect and let go. And how do we do that? How do we balance it? Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's so integral to mankind in general, to motherhood specifically. So I really liked what Ethan said about how holding, you know, two ends together is part of the complexity of life. You know, that there's the life and the death. There's the building the walls and then letting them go. There's the building up. There's the destroying. And that's why I referred to the cycle, the cycle of life, which motherhood experiences so strongly.
Chana.
And what I love about symbols, using symbols, is that they're very universal. So they can be used to understand many different areas and subjects. I really love working with symbols because of that.
It's cross-cultural. You don't need to understand the words. You can many different cultures can share that experience together.
Exactly.
Oh, we're having a
Yehuda,
little
any-
trouble hearing you, Yehudis. Your Wi-Fi is
Yeah, and
low.
after that we have a question by Chana and we move on and there will be some time for
Okay.
at the end.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see you all again. Hi, Judith and Dorit.
Hi.
I was
So
also struck, as Elizabeth was, I was also struck about the idea of you keep coming back to the well. You know, as a mother of an adult child, I just realized over time that you just keep coming back to the well, and that motherhood and even birth, that as a water is so connected to birth. And I just was also struck in a completely different direction. You know, in the Tanakh, women don't dig wells. I can't think of one woman who actually dug a well. There's always men who are digging wells for their women. But, you're actually doing a really holy thing by doing this, is that you're kind of replacing, or you're putting something into the absence of women in the Tanakh. So what you're doing is a really holy and also feminist act. So I just wanted to just comment about that. So thank you.
Thank you for the comment. The name of the piece is Where Rachel Dwells. It's named after the matriarch Rachel, who really symbolizes pain and love together, the yearning for children and the pain that comes with it. And the well in Kabbalah is symbolic of the woman, and a lot of the romances in the Tanakh happen around wells. So yes, absolutely.
I just put the link to the video in the chat.
Great, thank you so much, Yehudis. That was just very strong and important to see. And I love Chana's comment. She's so right. I don't think women didn't dig wells in the biblical time. I just think they didn't write about it. But that's just me saying. So moving on, we have Beth Herman Adler. She studied printmaking and graphic design at the School of Art Institute of Chicago. She worked as a graphic designer for more than 25 years and continues to bring design thinking to her creative process today, working as an artist and printmaker in Evanston, Illinois. Beth has had recent solo exhibits in Evanston and Chicago of her COVID diary and COVID houses, including work made during the post-quarantine. Beth, you are invited to present.
Okay. Well, thank you, Dorit, Judith, and Yona for this opportunity. I'm really excited to share this, and I guess we'll get going. So let's see. I'm going to begin with the flood. I really thought a lot about this, and the flood is a great metaphor for COVID, and it was certainly a plague of biblical proportions. I think Passover 2020 had a special resonance for everybody. I think that it really felt like we're in the midst of, like I said, a plague of biblical proportions, and I struggled with it, as most of us did, and I did a lot of work, artwork during the time, because it kind of kept me sane. I know a lot of people were completely paralyzed by it. I was energized by it. And so I did several projects, one of which was the COVID diary. And I did a collage a day, and for about a month during April and May. I was going to my studio, but I was behind my storefront. So as I finished these pages, I'd hang them in my window, and neighbors would come by and point to them. And I think I got lots of emails about which one really affected them. They all had pretty strong imagery. And I think they spoke to people, and they spoke to me. And when I finished about a month's worth, I put them all together in a COVID diary. I make artist books, and this, when it's outstretched, is 12 feet long. And each panel is one of those collages. And this is the type. I'm going to show you some examples of what I did. I collaged using some of my prints. You'll see the backgrounds are pieces of prints that I keep a drawer of prints that didn't quite work out, and I often use them in my collages. I cut up magazines. I looked on the internet. I really took whatever I could find, then I would draw into them. And every day I would have a thought, like my dreams were very intense during the early days of COVID. I felt like, we stayed in one place, we didn't go anywhere. I was used to traveling a lot, and it would all happen in my dreams. one of the major things that I kept thinking about was how we're going to get food, which is, you know, just I had some of my family was living with us at the time, and getting food was of primary importance. The other thing was, how long is this going to last? I think on April 24th, I would have been mortified to think it was going to be another year, but so it was. Where did it come from? Some days were just overwhelming. You know, it just really was profound. And I think these collages spoke to those profound feelings that I was having. The one on April 30th, Not Again, was my kids were asking me, have you ever lived through something like this? And I really hadn't. You know, I grew up just after the polio epidemic, but I did live through AIDS. And although it didn't affect me, you know, in the same way that COVID did, it was a plague and it was scary and a lot of people died. I think I mentioned my adult son was living with us and his wife, and she was pregnant. So that was kind of a mission for me during the pandemic, was like, take care of my kids and the potential new life. And that was really important to me. And that gave me sort of hope, I think, and which was hard, you know. And then the crow became a strong symbol for me during COVID. And it came about because I would walk from my home to my studio, which is about a mile, and I would pass a playground. And the playground was empty, except there were crows. And that was particularly sad and, you know, just tough. And then, you know, I took a lot of walks. My husband and I would take walks at night and we'd see people in the windows. We also walked through a cemetery, which is near my house, and there was lots of statuary. So, you know, walking and being a viewer, you know, like kind of what do you call it? Voyeur. And then after I did about a month of collages, I wanted to do something else. And, but I still was interested in chronicling what was going on. So I began making these houses. The first one I made, and I used the New York Times, the 100,000 Dead cover as I lined the interior. And some of these, I'm a printmaker and I do monoprints. So the exterior is a monoprint and the interior, and I just folded it and reinforced it with some lightweight cardboard, and they're pretty sturdy. And this was my first one, Memorial House. I really didn't have it in mind to do more, but I did. And I kept doing them. I guess I got into the habit of chronicling. I like the idea of chronicling. I still like the idea of chronicling. So I chronicled each month, and each month I lined these houses with a different COVID report from either, I get the New York Times in paper and I also get Time magazine. So that was primarily what I drew from. The crow you can see here again, sort of like my little mascot for COVID. And then I went on, I did one per month. They're not all here, but you can see again, the titles kind of chronicle things pretty well. And the titles are taken from one of the headlines that's inside these houses. And there were 9 total. And I ended with February of 2021. And it was, we have the vaccine, now what? So that was kind of, for me, since I got vaccinated at the very end of January, for me, I guess the world was opening up. And I decided to work on black paper and work toward light. And that coincided with a class, an online class that I took with Judith, Joseph, and Jane Shapiro, called Artist Beit Midrash. And it really was a good catalyst for thinking about some of this work. And the first session of that class was Let There Be Light, was in the beginning. And that really was what I was doing. I was working dark to light. I was trying to find the light again, the light being life. And I have this paper that a paper maker friend of mine makes. It's moon paper, and it's actually made by dripping white pulp on black paper. So it looks like the moon, and I cut this shape out and used it in this work quite liberally, because I thought the moon really does symbolize the light and the darkness. I generally work with different kinds of materials, leaves, stencils. The netted areas is actually the backing from a pizza my husband ordered, and I inked it and printed on it. And then I also started sewing into these prints, because I felt like the name of the Beit Midrash class was Concealing and Revealing and Concealing. And I really felt like we were looking through a curtain at this point, that we were just, peering through, able to see the light. And these strands really gave it that curtain-like feeling. It also had, it kind of felt like a talus, like I was cloaking myself in something. And as I was going through this work, and I hadn't done this before, I have to be honest, I counted the rows of stitches, and it turns out that there were 26, which I realized is the tetragrammaton. It's the numeric equivalent of the name of God. And was that a coincidence? I don't know. It was, maybe it happened. So moving on, this work actually really spoke to me of this after the flood, because I feel like this could have been called After the Flood, that this work itself it's a boat, it's, tethered by the light and the darkness. Again, the sewing sort of gave a hand in it. The letters were inspired by one of the slides that Judith showed during our Beit Midrash class. That was, let's see, what was the name of that artist? I keep forgetting. Oh, Virginia King, who did this beautiful piece of work of letters floating on the canal. And I hadn't put letters on this until then. And once I saw that, I thought, I loved the idea of floating letters. I also love that letters really speak to our civilization, and for me, it's language and basically the idea of the survival of our culture. So this piece is called Gravitational Pull. And this really, for me, is about Tikkun Olam. I had a friend of mine send me some wood scraps. So they were literally shards, and I hand printed those. And this is really a collage. So there are things that are printed, but then they're collaged onto the black paper and sewn. And the large form is the earth, and it's about pulling into being tethered by the earth and trying to pull up and become whole again, which I think is very meaningful during this time when everything felt very fragmented. The next piece of this series, and the series I call Luna because of the moon and that it's black and light in the darkness, and it just kind of spoke. I generally work in series as a printmaker. So this is the Luna series, and this piece is called Something in the Air. And that had many meanings to me. Something in the air really was, COVID was in the air. That was a big revelation during this time, that it was actually carried in the air. There was also quite a bit of going on in our society with the Black Lives Matter, with the election, with a lot of craziness, and it was in the air. And I felt like, you know, we need to take care of it. We need to take care of and pay attention to the ecology, to what's happened. Because I do think in some ways the COVID was a crisis of ecological proportions. And so the three pieces, really, the water, the earth, and the air, really spoke to the elemental nature of this next after the flood time.
We're kind of coming to the end of your time.
Beth,
and I just want to make sure that we have time for people to ask you questions and stuff. Do you want to wrap it up?
Yes, this is the last piece. Perfect timing. So the final piece that I did in this series is called Over the Moon. And this was inspired because during COVID, well, I don't even want to say during COVID, but in 2020 and 2021, I had 2 grandchildren. And that was really, I mean, that is Regenesis. That is literally Regenesis. And so everybody would say to me, oh my, you must be over the moon. And I thought, yes, I'm over the moon. And so this is about 2s, because I had 2 grandchildren. So you'll see things are in duplicate. And I think it really speaks to the idea of Regenesis, because what is Regenesis? It's, you know, it's new life. One other thing that I forgot to talk about was that also Noah, you know, there were 2 of everything on the ark. So I guess that's kind of what this is about. And that would tie into the idea of Regenesis. And that's it.
Thank you so much, Beth.
Thank you, Beth.
Very impressive project by, you know, every day a piece. This was fantastic. I remember walking with my dog next to your studio, and always people and new art rise up, and I miss that. I want to ask you a question, if possible, about this piece that was, you call it just one drop.
Yes.
Maybe you can put it on so you can tell a little about it. I was wondering about what's behind it and what was influencing you about creating this piece.
Well, it was really the shock. I think that was the point at which we realized how easy, you know, you could get COVID, that we started wearing masks outside, you know, that someone could walk by you and sneeze and boom, you could get COVID. So it was really, that was really what it was about. Just one droplet, you know, one microscopic little thing, and you were vulnerable.
Oh, sorry. Is that image the one that's on the right? Is that from the Spanish plague?
Yes, yes, it is. It's
Venice, I think. The Venetian doctors were outfitted with those
yes,
crow masks, and they stuffed them with herbs. They thought that it would prevent the germs from getting in, and they wore leather coats.
right. And also the actual, it's kind of interesting because I did research a little bit as well. It was used in England as well. The beak,
Like the crows a little bit. Sorry, go on.
the beak kept people at a certain distance too. It was a way of maintaining distance. So
there are some people write beautiful things on the chat, and there are some questions. So you can stop sharing your screen and people can maybe ask a few questions.
Let's see, we've got a few really good comments. Sharoni mentions that over the moon can also evoke being over it, as in all the people who feel like they're done with the pandemic. There's so many interesting linguistic wordplay aspects to your work. There's also a question from Kate Roth. She asked about the letters in the boats. Are they symbolizing people?
yeah, I think they're symbolizing culture actually, because I think language, you know, is part of our humanness. And so it's really about culture.
Wonderful. And also Noreen Dean Dresser made an interesting point, which is We are still flooded, are we not? The eco crisis is augmented by all the medical debris, which really relates also to Yehudis's work about Mother Earth and the experience of the Earth being the same experience that we have as human beings, and the body of the Earth is our body. So that's an interesting tie-in too with the medical, crisis that we're in, becomes an environmental crisis.
Yes, true.
Fabulous presentation, Beth. I love hearing you speak about your work. I've seen the work in person. I was fortunate to suit up with mask and everything when I stopped at your studio that one time, and we stood many feet apart, but it was great to hear you talk about it. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're going to move on to our third artist, Joani Share. And Joani is a mixed media artist and retired art educator who spent more than 20 years teaching art in Scottsdale, Arizona. Intrigued by color, shape, and texture, she works in a wide range of media and utilizes numerous techniques and approaches from painting, printmaking, fabric art, and collage to three-dimensional forms and freestanding sculptures. Joani has completed one-of-a-kind works of art for individual and corporate client commissions and is included in collections in the United States and abroad. Joani currently lives and maintains a studio in Concord, California. So Joani, I'd like to invite you to share your screen and show us your wonderful work.
Okay. I'm a mixed media artist, and I'm not afraid of media. I use all kinds of media. And I learned a long time ago that the media is not the message is the message. So I have a studio filled with everything I need plus. This piece still is a Shinkolay dry point etching, and I use figures in it. And a lot of the figures I use are sort of ambiguous on purpose. I don't look at my figures in terms of gender or race or ethnicity. Basically, I look at figures in terms of just humanity. And I also work in a series, and I worked with maps for a long time. And I use maps because somehow we have internal maps and external maps to help us find our way in the world. And by using a linear approach, by using a dry point etching on top of my collage, it's a way of kind of scratching into the surface to try to figure out where we're going, and how we're moving forward or back, basically in life. So this is on paper, and it's, I did this a little before the COVID, but it's something that I continue to work on and work in a series. I'm only putting one of this series in, but I have others using the map as I go through life.
Joani, would you explain before you move on what a Shinkolay is for people who don't know?
Okay, well, Shinkolay is a printmaking technique where it's like doing collage, except I use a press, so that when you're doing work on paper, I have all the elements of this, the figure, the map, they're all placed down on a piece of moistened paper, and I use a PVA type of glue. And then I have a plate which I go on top of it, which is I'm using a plexi plate that I have scratched into and inked, and place all that. It's almost like a sandwich. It goes into a printing press, and the pressure from the press attaches the paper, the collage materials to the background paper, and then the ink on top of that. So it's kind of a sandwich that goes through the plate all at once. So I am preparing the plate as it goes through. Does that make sense?
It's perfect. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, it's fine. You ask. I love questions, especially if it's a technical one. My husband's always asking me about what's Shinkolay again. This is another piece that is sort of a collage and a mixed media piece that's also kind of a Shinkolay approach. And the premise of Into the Light is I'm always thinking about light. We're looking at light in terms of focus on Shabbat. You're looking at into candles. You're looking at light in the surface taking you forward. I like to be in the ocean and you can't see fish unless there's light. I need light as sustenance. As an artist, we need light. Light is just one of those things that's just integral to our beings, that I need light to survive. And whether you're moving forward or back, you need light to help you spark towards the future in any capacity. So this is a mixed media piece, and some of it is collage pieces that I printed on and ripped up and then pressed and gone forward. This piece also has part of the map series, but the figure itself is a map because it's an internal map. And we're always trying to think, I'm always trying to think, where am I going? How am I going to get there? What's happening in the world? And with COVID, it was like this explosion of what is going on. I could not wrap my head around it. And I needed some kind of a guiding light, an internal map to help me move forward. I'm in a Musar group, and my Musar group during COVID has been really helpful and kind of settling and helping with internal discussions to be able to figure things out. Because this whole period to me, I was very creative, I worked a lot, but I just couldn't put a handle on what was happening in the world in so many different ways, from disease to violence. It was just too much. So I looked at this as an internal way of looking at possibilities. Where are we going? How do we move forward? You know, it's kind of an explosion of life in various forms. This piece, which I call Tears, was part of this whole year, a year and a half, has been so upsetting in so many different ways. I did a background in red purposely because I felt like as a humanity, we all bleed, and we all bleed red. So red to me was the essential bonding of humanity. And there were so many tears shed for so many different things, from Black Lives Matter to people dying to the election. This was just a year of just torment and tears flowing, in a sense that there wasn't a whole lot of joy, but there was joy in some ways. But so the tears were both positive and negative. And I wanted this to be sort of a unity of people coming together. The circle kind of represents not only COVID, but the world itself, of people coming together and trying to find their way of moving in a bonding, a circular path of conversation and discussion.
Johnny, can you say a little bit about the techniques in this one and the materials and what you used to create?
Sure. So this was a mixed media piece, and some of this is leftover from my printmaking. These are scrap pieces of just test pieces I did with my dry point etching on just paper, and which I ripped up. I used, it's mostly, the background is all acrylic, and I have drawers and drawers of different kinds of paper, which I layered. And so this is a series of printmaking and collage that I have attached to canvas and just kind of layered it. And I often work in layers in different ways. So this is a canvas piece with collage on top.
Thank you.
As we were getting into COVID, the whole concept of social distancing was like so bizarre to me. The idea of people together and not together, it's like, I just couldn't wrap my head around the idea that we were like, okay, you're out in a store, you're wearing a mask, you can be together, you can't be together. It was like, I felt like I was always floating. I didn't know where to go. Like, it was almost like being human bumper cars. So you just didn't know where to be. So that's painting. I had to find a way to kind of express my feeling about social distancing. So in a sense, each person has their own aura that you're kind of setting out and kind of sharing with someone, but not. You're in your own little contained vessel that you are in the world, but not in the world. So social distancing to me was, and still is, a very strange concept and strange terminology. As we went forward in COVID, and the circular images kept coming up, and they kept showing that kind of a little bizarre circular representation of what COVID is. I started using that in a lot of different pieces, and reading the paper and listening to what was going on in the world. I decided I needed to do a piece that was a little bit different. I started working a little bit smaller, and I started sewing. So these pieces are stories from the newspaper about COVID, about different people. There were some people that were getting sick, and there were some people that were putting their lives at risk. There were medical personnel. There was just so many people, and lots of women, a lot of women in the world taking on big jobs to help everyone else. And so a lot of these pieces are attached, and I started just, because I was making so many masks, I started sewing. So these pieces are on canvas, and they're actually stitched to the background. So the idea of having us join together and put together in a way that is touching each other by thread. And as we went forward, I kept thinking about conversations with friends and how people were taking sections and listening to different parts. And I had friends that were just literally falling apart, and others being strength for each other. And I kept thinking, you know, this thread aspect, we are literally hanging on by a thread. I was hanging on by a thread in different parts of this whole COVID experience. So I used my sewing machine as my linear aspect. I liked using it, and it's kind of a way of really taking collage and moving in a totally different direction. So the background is canvas, just unprimed canvas with collage paper on top and attached by using thread. And as we're going forward in this, and there were so many deaths and so many aspects of life in this country that was going in different ways. I thought this country was going on so many different crossroads and so many different discussions. And I kept thinking of the idea of kriya, a ripping cloth, of the Jewish tradition of ripping a cloth when someone dies. But there were so many people that were dying and so many people that were sick. And I couldn't have the idea of blackness because I had to be a way out of this. So I started just ripping paper, ripping cloth and sewing it. And I started ripping little pieces of cloth, and I didn't know what I was doing with it. And I started doing little squares and little sections, and I started working in a whole series. I have like probably 20 of these that are all different shapes and different sizes, but they're put together. So the idea of this torn cloth that brings us together in terms of humanity. So this is one, and here's another one, the same concept where I am ripping things and tearing things of the cloth and putting it together to make something so that we are bound together and not separated. And then I like the idea of this, the idea of how the linear aspect, and we're sort of in a crossroads of this country and humanity. And I decided I wanted to do something bigger. So I took the same concept and just made it bigger. So this is no longer on paper, it's a free piece, it's a wall piece. And I hadn't worked in fabric in a long time. I just kind of was going back to my roots. I started as a fiber artist. I was a weaver, and I hadn't really sewn in a really long time. And I started really enjoying the idea of sewing and using fabric instead of paint and paper, and taking that to a whole different level. And I'd made so many masks over the period of time that this became almost second nature to be able to sit down instead of painting in my studio, instead sewing in my studio. And as I worked, I actually had to buy a new sewing machine because I went through a machine by so much tension and pressure on the machine itself by moving it around.
Joani, I'm just going to give you a heads up that we're coming to the end of the program, and I know you've got a few more of these.
I have 2 more slides, and I'll just finish
Right.
it.
Yeah, I just want to leave room because people have good comments and questions.
Okay. This piece was a part of, probably like many of you, I was in discussion groups all during COVID because I couldn't meet with friends in person, and I had different art groups, and this was for a way of reconnecting with some of my friends from graduate school in Arizona State University from over like 30, 40 years ago. And we talked a lot online and on Zoom on a regular basis. And then at one point we decided we kind of challenged each other. So we did a piece that we had to have, well, the challenge was you had to have a linear aspect, you had to have some blue, it had to have some organic. So this for me was a piece of, and we didn't know what to call the group, so we just called it and this for me is a renewal of life, renewal of people, renewal of friendships, renewal of my background in fibers, and it was just kind of a joyful piece. And as I'm working in this, I don't know where I'm going. Part of my journey through COVID is going through media in a lot of different ways, and this piece is now part of a brand new series I'm working on, botanicals with leaves, and the idea of this is fabric and collage. And I don't know where I'm going with it, but something that's kind of intriguing to me because I'm spending so much time outdoors now in nature. And that is the end of my Regenesis.
Beautiful, beautiful work, and so relevant to what we've already seen this morning. Thank you so much, Joani, for sharing your rich and varied work with us. We do just have a couple more minutes. So I don't see specific, I see a lot of positive comments in the chat, but not necessarily questions. So if you have a question for Joani, why don't you just unmute yourself and jump in, please? If anybody has one.
Yes, Chana.
Hi, I have a couple comments. First of all, when it comes to, re-emerging after a flood, every single artist here has crossed into that. So it was brilliantly curated. Applause to you. All of them have something to do with being, taking things and putting them back together again. And, it's like this breaking down of the well. that was kind of a flood, but breaking down of the well, putting it back together, and Joani's weaving back together, like stitching back together. And it was really interesting how Joani's work and Beth's work seemed to dovetail into each other. That one was more fabric and the other was more paper, and they both included sewing. But my question really is for Beth. I was really moved by the house with the newspaper in it. And were those meant to be yahrzeit candles? This is the first question. Were those meant to be yahrzeit candles in the houses? And then I was also struck by the letters, kind of the idea of like, we're finding words again, we're able to have conversations again. So it seemed to me that that's what the letters reminded me of. And the final thing was, when you're talking about after the flood, you call them crows, but I saw the raven, the idea that Noah sent the raven out, and that was, the symbol of it was the end, but it was also the raven didn't come back. So it was, there was something about throwing, as an artist, throwing your artwork out into the world, and it's out there, and there's nothing, it's just out there. So I sort of saw this as a comment on art making in general, the kind of like building things back together, and just, as I said, throwing the crow out into the world. So those are the things that I noticed, but mostly I wanted to ask if any of that was deliberate or if it was unconscious and it just kind of came through you.
Well, yeah, one thing I want to just really, Joani, your work really speaks to me. I think in so many ways we're on a similar path. So I really appreciated seeing your work. The putting the candles in, I do think of these houses as memorials. They're memorials to people who died and people who suffered, people who were sick. And they were displayed in a window in a show that I had called My COVID Year. And so it was important that they had that aspect of illumination. Right now they're in another show, and I didn't use the candles because in daylight you wouldn't see them. But I do think of them as memorials, maybe not yahrzeit specifically, but definitely memorials. I did, after kind of developing the crow imagery, which you can see a lot in some of my other work that I did think about the crow and Noah, and I should have brought it up. I don't know why I didn't. It's kind of perfect for the topic. So.
I'm just looking to see if anybody has a question for Joani. Like I said, a lot of praise and thoughts. Someone commented, Hetty commented that she loved your bumper cars analogy, human bumper cars. I think that was,
Yeah,
that was
Johnny's
so
website is on the chat. Somebody asked there, Barbara, he wanted Johnny's website. It's up there at the chat. I can copy paste it down, but you can roll it up.
Yes, all the three artist websites are on the chat. I also put on the website of Virginia King, who is the artist that Beth referred to, who did the floating letters in the Venice Canal. So what do you think, Dorit?
Well, it was, as usual, amazing. I really loved the work, all of it, what we saw today. And it did feel like after the flood, after all. So thank you everybody for participating and joining us today. And I hope to see you. We hope to see you on Saturday, July 25th.
Sunday.
So Sunday, yeah, we're moving on to Sundays.
Yes.
And so this is going to be the new day. And then we're going to have participating Ellen Holtblatt and Leah Raab with beautiful, beautiful artwork that I can't wait to see, and some surprise for you too that we're not going to publish yet. So we want to see you. So thank you very much. And
Thank you so much to everybody.
Yeah.
My internet fell in the middle.
Well, I'm glad you came
Lovely
back
to hear
and you can watch the
everyone.
recording. So this will be, this was recorded. It'll be available on YouTube in a few weeks, thanks to Cheselyn Amato, who does our editing. So thank you, everyone, and we'll see you hopefully on Sunday, July 25th for our next program. Have a great week.
Thank you, Beth, Johnny.
Thank you to everybody.
And Yehudis.
Thanks very much.